Welcome, Dark Warriors. This is rumininlove. There will be no spoilers in this video, so you don't have to worry about that. In fact, there probably won't even be any gameplay in this video. So yeah, spoiler free. If you've never played these games, you have nothing to worry about. So all right, let's just get started. The first Star Ocean game. Okay. All right, everyone should play this game once. Everyone should play this game at least once, because it is a technical marvel. It's one of the best looking. It could arguably be the best looking SNES game. If you want to make that argument, you could make an argument that this is one of the top 5 like most technically impressive SNES games. But even though it's pretty and it's a technical marvel, I don't like this game that much. I gotta be honest. Every town looks exactly the same. The music is, in my opinion, not very good. Every town has the same theme. This game's story is not as good as its characters. Okay, this game has really good characters, especially for 1996 standards, but they're thrown into a plot that I don't like that much. And the routes, I hate the routes. They're too long, they're too maze-like. So I'm gonna put it in C tier. I'm not putting it in D tier because it is a very pretty game, and I do think everyone should play it at least once because it is a technical marvel. So because of its technical marvel status, I'm not gonna put it in D tier. I'm gonna put it in C tier. But this game really does fall apart if you look past its charm and glory, in my opinion. Okay, Star Ocean 2. Major step up from Star Ocean 1, in my opinion. The story in Star Ocean 2 is, in my opinion, brilliant. In my opinion, it's one of the best stories in gaming in general. The story really connected with me. I really loved all the characters. The art style is beautiful, and the combat is so addicting. This game has really addicting combat. You can also do this in Star Ocean 1. So actually, you can do this in every Star Ocean game to an extent, but you can break Star Ocean 2 so easily. So you can make your own difficulty if you want, pretty much. So if you want the game to be really hard, you can choose worse items and stuff to go through the game with like that. Or if you want to make the game easy, you can go into the crafting menu and then just completely break the game with overpowered items. It's so much fun. This game is fun when it's challenging and when it's easy, because it is so fun to just completely break this game using its crafting system. But it's also fun to just go through the game without abusing the crafting system and to just play it normally. Also, the boss fights. I love the boss fights in this game. This game has really, really good boss fights. And the soundtrack's just beautiful. It's iconic. I use this game's background music in my videos all the time. Also, they fixed, like, all of my issues from Star Ocean 1. So the routes from Star Ocean 1 that I hated, those are gone pretty much. The dungeons are much better. The towns have different unique themes now, and the towns actually look different from one another, so you can actually tell where you're going. You know what town you're in now. Unlike in Star Ocean 1, where you never knew where you were because every town looked exactly the same and every town had the same music. So luckily, that issue is fixed in Star Ocean 2, so I actually know where you are and where you're going in this game. So yeah, I really like Star Ocean 2. Personally, I would say it's one of the best Star Ocean games. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm gonna put it in S tier, definitely. Star Ocean 2 deserves to go in S tier. Okay, Star Ocean Bluesky. Believe it or not, I have played this game. I did. And this game is really good. This is a really good game. It's just a Star Ocean game for the Game Boy Color with all of its mechanics and complexity intact pretty much, and it's very impressive. Very impressive. It's kind of like Star Ocean 1 in a way, where it's a pure technical marvel for its system. Just like Star Ocean 1, I think everybody should play Star Ocean 1, even though I don't like it that much because it's a technical marvel. I think the same way about Star Ocean 2. Star Ocean Bluesky for the Game Boy Color. I think everybody should play this game at least once, because this game really is a technical marvel, and it is very impressive. Personally speaking, I do think it's better than Star Ocean 1, I really do. I do think this game is underrated. I've heard complaints about the stamina system, but those complaints are overblown. This game has a mechanic where your characters attack faster depending on how much stamina they have. However, you cannot tell how much stamina you have. Like, there's no indication on screen, so you kind of just have to feel it out. But after a while, you do get this sixth sense sort of thing in your head where you can just kind of tell when you should and shouldn't attack, when you should save stamina. And also, the music is surprisingly good for the Game Boy Color, and the graphics are actually really good for the Game Boy Color. I'm gonna put this in A tier. I would put it in S tier, but I will admit it is glitchy. The collision is not how it should be. It can be really hard to just navigate normally in this game, and that's probably its biggest flaw. This game's biggest detractor is probably that it's kind of difficult to move around sometimes. So even if you know what you're doing and you know where to go and you know the full plan, it can still be hard to play this game sometimes just because the game won't let you go forward because the collision's all weird and wonky. But that's kind of excusable because, you know, it's a Game Boy Color game. It's a very complex Game Boy Color game, so I think stuff like that is excusable. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Star Ocean 3. Okay. I have a love-hate relationship with this game. The story is so good. It's such a good story. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but god damn is the story in this game good. Also, this game released in 2004. I think it's released in 2004. When I was playing this game, I noticed so many things that I thought to myself, wait, this is a 2004 game and they're doing that? Like, it's nuts. There are a lot of things in this game that are ahead of its time. Like, for example, when a leaf falls from a tree in this game and that leaf falls into a puddle, the puddle make a little splash effect and the leaf will start floating around in the puddle. The shadows in this game are so good and realistic and dynamic. And this is a 2004 PS2 game. Characters do different things in battle depending on how you treat them. So if you're nice to a character, that character will heal you in battle. But if you're mean to them, they're not going to bother healing you. And I love that. That's so funny. Also, this game is giant. This is a massive, massive game. There is so much to explore. There is so much to find. The details never end, pretty much. This game is also kind of a technical marvel in a way, because this game did not have a long developmental cycle, but it's still such a long game with so many little details and has so much passion and charm behind it. But even though I think the story's great and the music is great, and I do like the characters, and I appreciate the effort, and I love all the little details, I will say that this game is too much at times. This game asks you to do things that are mind-blowing. And when I say mind-blowing, I don't mean that in a good way. I mean that in a, god, the game wants me to do this now kind of way. Okay, so no story spoilers. I'm not going to spoil anything about the story, but I will somewhat spoil something that you have to do at the end of the game. Okay, so the end of this game is too much. Too much. What this game asks you to do at the end of it is too much. So basically, what this game asks you to do, and this is mandatory, you cannot skip this. This is what you have to do to beat the game. You have to go through 5 dungeons. Okay, and for the record, these are not small dungeons. These are not mini dungeons. These are real dungeons. And they're dungeons that you've already been through. And these dungeons, the way they're designed is that they're stacked over each other. So you enter one dungeon, you go through it, and then right after that dungeon is the next dungeon. And then after that dungeon is the next dungeon. So these dungeons are basically stacked on top of each other. So if you're in dungeon 3 or 4 and you're dying and you can't do anything and you can't make any progress at all, you're going to have to backtrack to a town. So you're going to have to go through the other 2 dungeons you just went through And then you're going to have to stumble your way into a town, and then you finally get your stuff back, you regain your footing, and then you have to travel all the way back. And these dungeons get longer as you go through them. So dungeon 1 is the shortest one, dungeon 2 is the second shortest, and then the 5th dungeon is like the longest dungeon ever? It's like, I swear to God, it's like one of the longest levels I've ever seen in a game ever. The last level in this game is so long. And not just that, but the dungeon before the final dungeon is also so long. So if you need to heal, you're screwed. You have to reload the save, basically. And it's so weird that I've never heard anyone mention this or complain about this, because I hear complaints about big dungeons in RPGs all the time. There's this one dungeon in Grandia everyone complains about. If anyone who's played Grandia knows what I'm talking about. But I've never heard anyone make that same complaint about Star Ocean 3. I've heard people complain about the final dungeon in Final Fantasy 3, but no, the last dungeon in Star Ocean 3 is way worse. It is way worse than all of these other dungeons that people complain about. Every single time I hear someone say, oh, this dungeon in Grandia was awful, or oh, this dungeon in Final Fantasy 3 was so terrible, especially for the time, or Pandemonia in Final Fantasy 2, such a long, tedious dungeon, especially after the Jade Passage. Every time I hear something like that, I think Star Ocean 3 had a way, way worse dungeon, had a way, way worse, really complex, way too large dungeon that I never hear anyone complain about. And the fact that it comes after so much, and the fact that the nearest healing spot is so far away, and the fact they have to backtrack through so many dangerous areas just to get to it. So yeah, this might be the biggest PS2 game. It never ends. There's so much to do in it. The music is amazing. The story is great. The atmosphere is fantastic and has a lot of cool little technical flares that were rare for the time and impressive for the PS2. The shadows in this game look really, really good. They look way better than a shadow should look in a game like this, because this game has like an anime cartoon pop-up book kind of art style in a way, but the shadows are just so good and so realistic. But the design really harkens back to Star Ocean 1. Just you got all these long routes, and the dungeons, they really start to get on me. I think my biggest complaint about this game is that the dungeons are just too much. They're too much. They really are too long. The dungeons in this game are like 3 times the length of the dungeons in Star Ocean 2. And the fact that the end of the game, so this is the game that people are going to remember. It's going to stick in their heads forever. This is like the big climax. The fact that the developers seem to double down on their philosophy when making this game. And they were like, you know what? We're going to make the players backtrack through all of these long dungeons. And we're going to end it off with one of the longest levels pretty much ever, and we're gonna make it so you have no good way to get back to a town to heal. That just rubs me the wrong way. And yes, I know it's supposed to be hard. It's the end of the game, so it's supposed to be challenging. But in my opinion, it's not challenging. It really is not that hard. It's just extremely tedious. So yeah, I do have a lot of good things to say about this game. Once again, I think everybody should play it at least once. The story is so good. You know, the characters are so good. So yeah, Star Ocean 3, I wish I could love you as much as other people seem to love you. This game is very special to a lot of people. This is some people's Final Fantasy VII. Some people really, really love this game, and I really wish I could be one of those people. But there's so much padding, and there's so much backtracking, and it takes forever to make progress. And also, like, okay, there is this part in this game that if you know what you're doing, you can get through it pretty quickly. But if you don't really know what you're doing, which most people aren't going to really know on their first playthrough, there is this part where, and I'm not even exaggerating, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, there is a part where you're going to have to spend a good 1 to 5 hours, depending on how good you are at figuring things out. You're going to have to spend a long time crafting. There's this part where you kind of have to, you have to craft, because you're going to die if you don't. You need the good stuff, so you're going to have to spend a good amount of time crafting. And it's so convoluted and hard to figure out that you straight up might be crafting for a good 5 hours. I'm not even exaggerating. Now, granted, if you play this game a lot, you can get through that part in like 5 minutes. Okay, if you know what you're doing, you can just get the stuff you want. You can leave. It's easy peasy, lemon squeezy. You have nothing to worry about. But that, I don't care. Okay, it's still, if you still, you know, this is like one of the least beginner-friendly games I've ever played in my life. And even if you're good at crafting systems in other games, even if you know all about the crafting systems, because a lot of games have that kind of system in it, even if you're used to these kinds of systems, there's a good chance you're going to go into Star Ocean 3 and you're still going to spend a good 1 or 2 hours just trying to get the stuff you want. And it can be really, really frustrating sitting there for such a long time trying to figure everything out just so you can not get murdered in the next dungeon. So yeah, this game, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to make a compromise. If I was judging this game on a first playthrough basis, I would put it in C tier. If I was judging this game based off of multiple playthroughs, so the playthroughs where you're good at the game and you already know what you're doing, I would definitely put it in A tier. And because I've played this game 3 times, I'm gonna put it in A tier, because the technical flair and the shadows and like all the little things like that, and the story's so good, and the pre-rendered cutscenes are so beautiful, and the music is so good, and all that is just so good. Even if I don't like the padding, and I think the end of the game is kind of a pain in the ass, it's all water under the bridge, so it is what it is. Okay, Star Ocean Anamnesis. Okay, believe it or not, I've actually seen a lot of this game, and I do know a lot about it. And this is... so many people are gonna watch this, and they're gonna roll their eyes so hard at me, and I'm sorry about that. But I don't even know if I should say this. This is embarrassing. I'm gonna say the most fuck-ass thing ever, okay? I don't like how they sexualized my favorite characters. No, alright. So, okay, for some reason, every single character in this game is, like, sexualized. They all have those, like, sexy outfits, and it's kind of cringe and cheesy. I do like how this game kind of made Valkyrie profile canon, so that's kind of cool. Wait, did it? Did it do that? I think this game made Valkyrie profile canon to Star Ocean. If I'm wrong, someone please correct me. But yeah, it looks fun. It's just like a gacha kind of game. It's just a completely harmless kind of cash grab kind of experience. There's nothing much to say about it. If I did play this game, I probably wouldn't be as hard on it as others. But I've never actually played it. I've only seen it and, read about it, and I know stuff about it. So, just to be fair, I'm going to put this in a have... Oh, whoops. Wait, oh my gosh. I'm bad at typing. Have not played. There we go. What the hell? There. I promise I'm better at typing than that. Anyway, yeah, have not played. I think if I did play, I would be more lenient on it than others. Probably put it in B tier or something, but I've not played, so. Okay, Star Ocean First Departure R. Thank God this game exists. Okay, I will admit, when I first played this game, I didn't like it that much. But then I played Star Ocean 1, like the original, and that made me realize how good of a remake this is. This game has less backtracking. They added a ship to one of the towns that helps you get to one of the other towns faster, and that makes everything so much better. They got rid of the routes. Thank God they got rid of the routes. Oh my God. So you don't have all of these branching paths between areas that get you lost. And every town looks different now, and the towns are beautiful in this game. And the music, every town has different music now. That's such a big upgrade. That's a massive, massive upgrade. I don't think people really talk about or acknowledge how big of an upgrade that is. Because in the original version of this game, every town looked the same and had the same music, which means you have no idea where you're going or where you are. But Star Ocean First Departure R, the remake fixes that in such a beautiful way. It makes every town look unique, every town look beautiful, every town in this game does look really, really good, and it adds beautiful, different music to all the towns. Every town in this game has a beautiful town theme, and that's such a massive upgrade. That makes this game so much better. So it has less backtracking, It's more generous, so it's easier to break with its crafting system, making it more like Star Ocean 2. I think this is a very underrated remake. I really do. This is a very underrated remake to me. Because whenever I hear people comparing these two games, they basically just say Star Ocean 1 is for the SNES and then the remake is for the PS4. But besides that, they're not much different. I mean, I guess the art style is different. No. It's not just the art style that's different in this remake. No, it's the gameplay updates that make it so much better. And, you know, those updates aren't acknowledged that much. I played Star Ocean First Departure before playing Star Ocean 1, the original version, and I was kind of eager to go into Star Ocean 1, the original version, because I heard it was basically the same as the remake, just on the SNES, and it has a different art style. So I was eager to get into it like that. I was like, oh, it's gonna be so cool seeing this modern game on an SNES. It's going to be cool to see that. But no, I started to play it and then I realized that there are so many differences between these two games. Differences that for some reason aren't mentioned anywhere. I did not know of these differences despite doing research on the differences before playing. And I started to realize the more I played Star Ocean 1, just how good of a remake Star Ocean First Departure is. Because when I first played Star Ocean First Departure, I thought it was this tedious game with a ton of backtracking. But no, the original Star Ocean game is an even more tedious game with even more backtracking. And they really cut that down in the remake. So in a way, they're keeping it true to the original, but they also made it so much better. My biggest complaint is that some of the plot elements are better in the original. There are scenes in Star Ocean 1 that are just flat out better than the scenes they were replaced with in the remake. But besides that, I really do believe the remake is such an underrated remake. You know, it's just they got rid of the routes. They added new music to each area that needed new music. They made every area look unique. They cut down on the backtracking. And what the developers did is they looked at Star Ocean 1 and they said, okay, we need to make this better. We need to cut down on the backtracking, but we can't completely get rid of the backtracking because that's in part of the integral game design. So they tried to find out clever ways to decrease it a little bit. And yeah, I'm gonna put it. I'm definitely putting Star Ocean First Departure above the original. I do think it's just a solid upgrade all around. Even if I do think some of the plot elements in the original were better. However, I'm not done talking about Star Ocean First Departure. I'm not done talking about this game yet. I am talking about the PS4 version of this game, okay? I am willing to put the PS4 version above the original SNES version. If I was ranking the PSP version, I would put that right next to the original Star Ocean. Because, and thank God they fixed this in the PS4 port of the PSP version, the original PSP version of Star Ocean First Departure has the worst character speed I've ever seen. Ever. For the record, I'm not even being hyperbolic. When I say Star Ocean First Departure for the PSP has the worst speed ever, I really do think I mean that out of any game I've ever played in my life. Roddick is too slow. He's way too slow. Roddick walks at a snail's pace in the PSP version, but luckily they made him like twice as fast or 3 times as fast in the PS4 version, and that small change goes such a long way. So yeah, I'm putting it in B tier. Okay, Star Ocean 4. Let's go. I love this game. I'm putting it in S tier. Okay. Look, okay, I don't care what anybody says. You know, I know people criticize this game's story. I love this game's story. I think this game's story is badass. Because that's what, like, the main complaint I kept hearing was. I heard people didn't like this game's story, and they thought the characters were stupid, and it was a little over the top. But no, I was really into it. You know, the twists in this game are really interesting. This game has some really cool little twists here and there. This game has amazing characters. Like, I really like Edge. I really, really like FaZe. He's a great character. Raymay has a standout part later because Edge is being lame, so she has to take charge, and Raymay is a very badass character when that happens. She kind of steals the show and becomes the leader for a little bit. Crow doesn't appear much, but when Crow does appear, he's a badass. Also, the dungeons in this game are just beautiful. The final dungeon in this game is like the most beautiful, or like one of the most beautiful dungeons in a game I've ever seen. It's so beautiful. It's so gorgeous. And, you know, I know people don't like the fan service. You know, it is cringe. There is this one character design. I really, really don't agree with the design of... I can't even remember her name. Long story short, there's this one character whose design is so inappropriate. It really does just feel like pedo bait, and I do disagree with that. I do think that that is disgusting. But besides that, I think the character designs in this game are kind of blown out of proportion, because I hear people say Miria is over-sexualized. Miria is over-sexualized. She has boob physics. Ew, gross. Her tummy showing. Ugh. She has so much cleavage. She's barely wearing anything. Oh no. But despite that, okay, people complain about Miria's design, but no one complains about Arumat's design, and he's pretty much just as sexualized as Miria. So why do people complain about Miria, but no one complains about Arumat? And I don't know. It's just, it is what it is. If you can look back some of the cringe anime trope, bait stuff in this game, you really do get some awesome characters past that. And the story is really interesting. I was hooked. The plot in this game is so interesting. It really did just pull me in, because it's like a mystery kind of game. Throughout this game, you're kind of, rubbing your chin, adjusting your monocle, thinking like, okay, what's really going on here? Like, what's going on in this game? Like, what's happening in the background? And if you think there's too much fan service and the private actions are super cringy, and you think the characters are annoying and all that good stuff, all this stuff I've heard a million times in forums, I will say, in a way, I do agree. I actually kind of agree. It can get cringe, it can, I just like look away, pause the game, like go, the cringe. But, despite that, this game's story just really, really pulled me in, and it's so fun. The combat in this game is so polished. The boss fights are amazing. I know people have complained about the boss fights, but, different strokes for different folks. I can understand how people don't like the boss fights, but personally, I really liked them. I love how they're these, like, dangerous hulking monsters that take forever to kill. I like that. It adds a lot to the atmosphere of the game. It adds a lot to the feeling of the game. And I know, people get frustrated waiting for these boss fights to die because they really do take forever sometimes, and their weak points takes a long time to appear. But to me, it really makes the game feel like this desperate attempt. And it feels like these monsters are just never, ever going to die. Like, are we really going to make it out of this alive? I don't know. In my opinion, the boss fights, which a lot of people hated, in my opinion, those boss fights added a lot to the atmosphere and feeling of this game. And yeah, I think Star Ocean 4 is very underrated. And I feel like a lot of people gave it a bad rap because it is a very cringy game. If you think Xenoblade 2 is cringy, Star Ocean 4 is way worse in that regard. But I mean, I don't know, just the story really is so good, and the gameplay is so actually addicting. The combat in this game is so really good. It's really, really good. Just the attack animations, the way it feels to hit enemies. Every character in this game is good, which is great. Every other Star Ocean game is kind of unbalanced in a way. I don't get that vibe from Star Ocean 4. Star Ocean 4, every character is just as good as each other character in their own unique way. And yeah, every character, you can have a team of any character combination you want in this game. Every character is good in their own way. And every character is fun to use. They really are. Every character is just a blast to play as. Even the cringy characters. I loved playing as, what's her name? I still can't remember whatever the name of that pedo bait cat girl is, but even though she has a stupid character design, she's still really fun to play as. And Edge has this one attack where he like holds a ball of light in his hand and he charges forward towards enemies. That is so fun to spam the hell out of. I was spamming just that attack the entire game, and I was having a blast. I just stuttered there. Bacchus's attacks. Oh, Bacchus. It's such a fun character to play as. I love playing as Bacchus. He feels like a robot of pure destruction. And then there's Arumat. Arumat's just a blast to play as well. His attack animations look so cool. Just the way he swings that scythe, and then, you know, you get like the after effect of the scythe, and then it hits an enemy, and the game kind of does like a little clack effect. And it's just, oh, it's so addicting. So yeah, I am gonna be this game's champion, and I'll put it in S tier. Okay, Star Ocean 5. All right, I'm gonna be honest, not my least favorite. This game does have positives. You know, the combat is really good. I like how you can quickly swap between each character. The customization in this game is really, really good. This might be a strange thing to praise, but this game has a really underrated menu. Yes, I mean the pause menu inventory screen in this game is really good. It might actually be the best in the series. Just, I loved assigning different like customization tactics to each character and like making them each how I want them to play. That's awesome. Because in the other Star Ocean games, your characters pretty much do whatever they want. I mean, you can kind of control what they do because you can select different tactics onto them. But at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. But in Star Ocean 5, it's a little more complex, but it's somehow also really simple at the same time. And you can just go about customizing each character's AI to perfectly hearken to what you want them to do. And that might sound complicated, that might sound overwhelming, but it's not. That it's genius. If I was tasked to make this system work in a game, I would overcomplicate it. I would definitely not know how to make that system simple in the slightest. But no, the developers of this game, Star Ocean 5, they made it so you can customize what you want each character to do. You can customize different AI tactics to them. You can make it so they do super effective damage to different types of enemies, and you can make it so they heal you in certain intervals and stuff like that. And they somehow made what should be a complicated mess simple and fun. Because in the other Star Ocean games, you can break it using the crafting system, and you can do that in Star Ocean 5 too. You can make these overpowered weapons and stuff, but you can also break the game using your partners, which is really fun. So you can just set one of your partners to just heal you indefinitely all the time. You can set one of your other partners to do insane damage, so whenever they let out a lightning bolt or whatever, it just decimates a boss fight. So yeah, I do think the gameplay is really fun, you know, it's addicting. You also have some really nice looking areas in this game, and the soundtrack is underrated, but I have two major issues with this game, okay? Alright, so I don't think this counts as a spoiler, but the cutscenes in this game are genuinely terrible. There is too much dialogue in this game. There is way too much dialogue. The conversations that the characters have in this game go on and on. They just won't stop talking to each other. And these cutscenes are unskippable. And nearly every single time I was done watching one of these cutscenes, I swear to God, nearly every time I thought to myself, that conversation that just took place did not need to be that long. It did not need that much dialogue. They could have gotten the same point across in maybe 6 dialogue exchanges, but no, it's like the conversations last forever. I don't think the writing in this game is good. It's not quaint. It just goes on and on. You cannot skip the cutscenes, which just makes it worse, which makes replaying the game a pain because you're going to enter a cutscene and then you're going to look at your phone waiting for your characters to stop meandering in these conversations they're having. Also, I'm usually not the kind of person to complain about this, but in this specific game, it is a problem. They put the run button on circle, and I'm just going to say this. Everyone who's played this game thinks that's a problem. I'm just going to say that. I have never talked to someone who's played this game who did not think circle as the run button wasn't a stupid decision. It should have been R1 or L1. Putting it on a face button just makes the game a little more frustrating than it should be. Also, I'm not gonna spoil any story beats, but the love In this game, okay, every Star Ocean game has the love plot. You know, it's a part of every single Star Ocean game. Every Star Ocean game has the love side story because the protagonist has to get with someone. The main love story in this game kind of disgusts me. Oh my god. I don't know what else to say besides that without spoiling, but I really didn't like the love in this game. It really rubbed me the wrong way. It made me feel kind of gross. I was thinking he's not actually gonna get with her, and then he did, and I was like, you can't be serious. This is so weird. So yeah, the story, the writing, the unskippable conversations, it's just dumb. The backtracking in this game can get tiresome. But you know, besides that, you know, the combat, very, very good, very addicting. The towns are these little quaint areas that are fun and easy to explore. You got a lot of cool little side quests here and there. Like, I will say, if you skipped Star Ocean 5 because you heard it's bad and you just went straight to 6, I say you should definitely play Star Ocean 5. You should definitely go back to it, because this game, I think it usually goes for around 20 bucks. Sometimes it's on sale, and that's a good deal. You know, that's like a really, really good deal, because like, you're getting a 20-hour game for 20 bucks. So you're getting a lot of content for not much money. So yeah, I think the Star Ocean game has the worst story, it has the worst love plot, it has the worst cutscenes, but that does not stop it from the gameplay still being on point, even if I don't like that the run button is the circle button. And it also doesn't stop this game from still being a pretty good deal, because it's like 20 bucks and it's a 20-hour game. And all things considered, you know, I still think, you know, people should play it. So I really think it's not the end of the world. I'm going to put it in C tier. I'm going to put it right above Star Ocean First Departure. I mean, Star Ocean 1. Next up is Star Ocean 6. I highly recommend anyone who played with this game with HDR to just turn HDR off, because the HDR in this game is borked completely. I do not think this game was designed around HDR at all, but for some reason it still allows that to be an option. So if you have HDR on your PS5, there are some areas in this game that are so incredibly dark that you just straight up can't see anything at all. And that's definitely not intended. That has to be some kind of developer oversight. But with HDR off, the game looks great. So a big praise I'm going to give this game is that it has one of my favorite minigames ever, and I'm not even joking. This game has an Othello clone, and it's so fun. It really is just a blast. So sometimes I won't even be playing the game. I'll just be playing this game's side minigame, and I'll be having a great time. I would play that game on its own if there was some kind of board game equivalent. So yeah, this game's Othello minigame clone, I'm gonna praise that hardcore. I'm gonna give that a 10 out of 10. Whoever designed that is a freaking genius, and I'm so glad that made it into the final game. It really, really helps with the tedium and the pacing, because, you know, when you're going between towns, sometimes you just want a little break, and you have these NPCs you can talk to, and you can play this very, very fun minigame, and it really helps the pacing, and it helps everything stay on track. So that's a lot of fun. Also, this game's gameplay, I really appreciate this game's gameplay. It really feels like they looked at every previous Star Ocean game and they thought to themselves, okay, let's just make a game without those issues. So, for example, some people might have thought the running speed in the previous games was too slow. So the running speed in Star Ocean 6 is nuts. Oh my gosh, it's dark. Yeah, the running speed in Star Ocean 6 is by far the best running speed in the series. The characters in this game are fast, and they're very pleasant to control. Also, you can fly. Thank God, I love that. I love how you can just charge in the air, and you can just find things hidden in the sky. It's so cool. Everything feels very weighty. It's very satisfying. I like how you can feel the footsteps in the haptic PS5 controller. That's so nice. When you're playing this game, like, with this controller, like, it makes everything so much better. Just the player experience from the controller to the game using a PS5 controller is so brilliant. It's amazing. It's some of the best haptic feedback I've played in a game yet on the PS5. So you can really feel like every attack in the controller, and you can also hear it in the controller because the controller makes noise when certain attacks connect. So when you lay down a really heavy attack and you can feel that attack in the controller, it's amazing. It really is just such a good moment. And I'm that one guy who's played a lot of games on the PS5. I'm officially a part of the I've played PS5 games on my PS5 club. There are 3 of us in this club. And I am willing to say, out of all the PS5 games I've played, Star Ocean 6 has some of the most overlooked and underrated haptic feedback. It feels like the developers knew they were making a PS5 game and they locked in, and they wanted it to be a PS5 next-gen experience. So they were like, okay, we have to, really take advantage of this controller. We have to program it so it's all nice and accurate. We have to make the attacks, feel like they're like surging through the controller. And just, I don't know, man, like with that super, super fun minigame that they added, the Othello clone, along with how the combat in this game feels when you're holding a PS5 controller, it really is such a fun game. This game is so much fun. And, I really wish I could just end it there. I really wish I could just say that this game is a blast and I don't look like a mess right now and COVID never happened. But this game, unfortunately, especially after Star Ocean 5, which had an amazing menu, unfortunately Star Ocean 6's menu is really terrible. It is so difficult to navigate, even if you've already played the game. So the menu in Star Ocean 5 was so good. It was a really good menu, and I noticed stuff like that. And then you go on to Star Ocean 6, and the menu is just difficult to figure out. I've played Star Ocean 6 3 times, and every time I go back to it, I'm just like, I still have a hard time navigating the menu. The text is way too small. It feels like things don't get saved in the menu properly. Because I swear there were so many times where I would be in the menu and I would go to one screen and then go to a different screen. And the screens would be like different than later. So you go to the weapons and then I navigate to the characters. And then, I don't know, like later in the game, I'll be in the weapons and I'll try to navigate to the characters the same way that I did earlier in the game. And it just will not work. I don't know, it feels like the menu just randomly changes throughout the game, which I know is, I know that's not the case. I know I'm doing something that's messing me up. But the menu in this game is so counterintuitive, and the text in the menu is too small, and it really is just a pain to navigate. And for the record, this is an issue. This is totally an issue, because most of a Star Ocean game, or a good majority of it, is the menu. You're going to be in a menu in a Star Ocean game longer than you're going to be in a menu in other games. So in the previous Star Ocean games, especially Star Ocean 5, it wasn't that bad because the menus were, to an extent, intuitive in a way. But even though the developers should have honed the menu by now, it's their 6th Star Ocean game. Even though this Star Ocean game probably should have had the best menu, it, in my opinion, actually has the worst menu. In my opinion, it's worse than the menu in Star Ocean Bluesphere. It's harder to navigate than that menu. And Star Ocean Bluesphere had a menu that was too complicated for itself. Star Ocean Bluesphere was a Game Boy Color game, and the menu in Bluesphere is too complicated for the Game Boy Color. So that can really hinder people's play experience in playing Bluesphere. But no, it's like when you're playing Star Ocean 6, it somehow has a worse menu. And I swear to God, a lot of the playtime in this game is just being lost in the menu. But yeah, besides that, I do think this game is great. The story is really interesting. The music is very, very good. So yeah, worst menu, great combat, and a very awesome, fun minigame on the side there if you want to play with that, along with a very interesting story. I'm going to put it in... I do think I like it more in Star Ocean 3. I'm going to put it in the top of A tier. I really wish I could put it in S tier. I really wish I could. But the menu really is that bad to navigate. Also, this is a minor criticism. There's this costume you can get that I wish was just unlockable. I don't know, just this is such a stupid thing to complain about. But I don't like it when games show your character wearing something really, really cool and really badass, and they don't allow you to unlock that costume or allow you to play with them in that costume at all. I know that's such a dumb thing to complain about. I should just overlook it, But yeah, one of the characters gets a costume in this game that really does look amazing, but it's only in like a short cutscene and that's it. So, but once again, I know that's a stupid thing to complain about. But yeah, I would say, you know, this is a great game. Everybody should play it. You know, such a fun experience. The story really does pull you in, but if you're playing with HDR, your experience is going to be completely borked because HDR just looks terrible in this specific game, and the inventory menu is just a complete mess, and also the performance really is not there. This game can chug, it can also crash, so I really wish I could put it in S tier, but sometimes I'm feeling like it's A tier, so I'll put it in A tier. Okay, Star Ocean's Second Story R is my favorite game. It's my favorite game. I played this game, I could not believe how basically perfect it is. Like, really, it is basically a perfect game in my opinion. It's like, okay, what flaws does this game have? I can't think of any. I'm being fucking serious. There is a level in the original version that has water that looks really nice, and that water is taken out of the remake. Like, see, like, every complaint I have about the remake just isn't even a complaint. It's just a stupid nitpick. What's another criticism I have about the remake? I'm really thinking hard. In the original game, you could see Alan on the bridge, but in the remake, that detail was taken out. See, you see what I mean? This is a fantastic remake. It's such a good remake if my complaints are dumb crap like that. It really did fix every issue I had with the original, pretty much. It has my favorite story in the series. This game is just gorgeous. It's a beautiful, beautiful game. I love all the added flair. They gave every character new idle animations that all look amazing. This game has 2 different soundtracks that you can choose from, and both soundtracks are amazing. You cannot go wrong with either soundtrack. The navigation, man, the overworld in this game, they overhauled it. In my opinion, it's so much better than the overworld in the original Star Ocean 2, which already was not a bad overworld to begin with, but they really honed in. They really made it a better overworld. You can find so much cool stuff, so many cool little secrets. I love all the little, you know, side quests, all the private actions. The combat in this game is so fun. It is such a blast. The crafting system, it is by far the best crafting system in the series. In my opinion, it is, at least. I've heard a complaint, in quotation marks, that they made the crafting simpler. That is such a misguided criticism. That's something that should be praised. And the crafting system is not simpler, despite popular belief. No, they made the crafting system easier to navigate and more intuitive, but it still retains its complexity. The crafting in this game is a blast. In fact, in my opinion, it's probably the only crafting system in the entire series, except maybe Star Ocean 4, where you don't need a guide. You do not need a guide to be good at the crafting in this game, because it's already all there in the menu and you can just figure it out yourself if you just experiment. And the voice acting, you have 3 different voice actors in this game. You have the original Japanese voices, the remade Japanese voices, and the English voices from the PSP version. For the record, I think the PSP version is the worst version, so if I was ranking the PSP version of Star Ocean 2, I'd probably put it in B tier. But yeah, I think all the voices are amazing. I think the English voices are blown out of proportion with how bad they are. There are some really good English voices. Celine has a really, really good English voice actor. I'm going to give praise to Celine's voice actor. I mean actress. Another voice actor I really like in the English version is Diaz. Diaz has a really, really good English voice actor. I do think the English voices are underrated and they're not as bad as everybody says they are, even if I do prefer the Japanese voices overall. The character portraits, the new character portraits are amazing. I love all the character art in this game. They all just look like badasses, total badasses. I will say I do like some of the original translation better, because this game was retranslated for the PS4 version, and the translation, I guess, is technically better than the PS1 version, but there are some things in the PS1 version I do like better with how it was written and how it was said. But that's just like a small little gripe. It's not something I actively think about when playing. A minor criticism I have is the English voices are missing things. So if you choose the Japanese voices, you're going to get more voice acting because some lines of dialogue aren't translated in English. So if you want the full voice acted experience, you have to choose the Japanese voices. But that's like a little small criticism. I don't really care about that, honestly. Like, for example, in the English voice acting, there is one character who I'm not going to spoil who it is, but there's a character who changes. There's a character who undergoes a transformation, so to speak. And in the English version, their voice stays exactly the same before and after the transformation. Their voice is identical to before and after. The Japanese version, their voice changes. Their voice changes in the Japanese version, and it's a really interesting and cool detail. But that detail is missing from the English voices, sadly. However, to defend the English voice acting, I will say the Wise Men's voice acting is actually really good. I think I actually prefer the Wise Men's English voices to the Japanese ones. But yeah, this game, the private actions, the dungeons, the story, is just all beautiful. The soundtrack is amazing. I can't really think of any super genuine criticism I have about this game that matters to me. Everything I talked about with the voice acting is just like little stuff I don't really care about. Those are more or less just gripes from someone who cares way too much about this game, and it doesn't serve as any actual real criticism. I just loved the visual presentation. Every area in this game is beautiful. The water in this game looks fantastic. I love the different time of day changes. I love the new character art. Welch is one of my favorite characters, and seeing her with the art style in this game put a big giant smile on my face. I love how Welch looks in this game. And the story really is one for the ages. It's one of the most impactful and just beautiful and emotional stories in a game, in my opinion. And every other character is just so fun. They all have their own private actions. The combat in this game looks amazing, and it's also so fun, just with all the particle effects flying everywhere and everything getting super hectic. It really is just a blast. There is not as much backtracking in this game as the other Star Ocean games. They really cut out on that. They added fast travel, thank God. This is something that the earlier Star Ocean games desperately needed. In fact, the original Star Ocean 2 probably needed it, but they added it in the remake, and it just adds so much replayability. You can have a blast with this game if you're experiencing it for the story or experiencing it for the game. I can have a blast with this game just skipping all the cutscenes and fast traveling to each and every area, running through the game, like speed running it. It's so fun. There is not a single moment of slowdown in this game. It's just constantly go, 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 go. Like, I think I am willing to say that this might actually be my favorite game, as well as my favorite Star Ocean game. I like to say that I don't have a favorite game. Whenever someone asks me that, I'm just like, I don't have one. It's like a tie between like 20 different games, so I don't have one. But if I was really forced to choose, I would say that Star Ocean 2, the remake, is probably my favorite game of all time. Just, it fixed every issue I had with the original game, and I already loved the original game. My only issues with this game really are that it's missing some extremely minor details that were in the original. But, that's just, I'm really not the kind of person to care about that kind of thing. Like, for example, remember earlier how I was talking about that one character whose voice changes in Japanese, but it does not change in English? Well, that's because that's a detail taken out of the remake. In the original PS1 version of the game, their voice did change in the English version, but that was taken out of the remake. So, there are just like little like tiny minor oversights like that. But I would say that this is still my favorite game of all time, and it's a blast, and I really do think everybody should play this game. You do not need to play Star Ocean 1 first before playing this game. I will admit, the story is, in my opinion, better and more emotional if you do play Star Ocean 1 first, but that is not necessary, and I think everybody, if they haven't played a Star Ocean game, they should just go right into Star Ocean 2, play this, and you'll have a great time, trust me. I went into this game with extremely high expectations. I was so excited. and it ended up being better than I thought it was going to be. And I really hope we get to see more from these developers soon, because the people who made this game, they're not a well-known studio at all. They were basically just nobodies who came out of nowhere and made one of the best RPGs ever made. They remade Star Ocean 2, which is already considered one of the best RPGs ever made, and they made it a lot better than the original Star Ocean 2, which is insane for a studio that no one's really heard about. So yeah, I would say that this is my ranking. I do think the first Star Ocean game is the worst one. I think it has good visual flair and it's charming and it's a technical marvel, but besides that, it's not very good besides that. And then next up would be Star Ocean 5, which is a fun game, but the cutscenes are just bad. They're way too long and way too boring, and it takes out of the experience. Next up is Star Ocean First Departure R, which does fix a lot of my issues with the original game, but because I think the original game is inherently poorly designed, I kind of think a lot of that design falls into the remake as well, which is why it's in B tier, not A tier. Next is Star Ocean 3, which I want to put in S tier, but I also don't want to put in S tier. So I put it in A tier because despite the amazing story and all the cool little visual flares and how fun this game is, despite all that, I do think this game gets pretty tedious. Next up is Bluesky, which I think is just a really fun, charming, and very impressive Game Boy Color game. Next up is Star Ocean 6, which in my opinion is a great game, but the menu is so god-awful that I unfortunately cannot put it into S tier. Next up is Star Ocean 4, which I personally thought was a blast. Like, yes, some of the characters are cringe and half the cast can be annoying, but it is what it is, and the gameplay more than makes up for it, and the story behind all that is still a great story. And really, even though, you know, some of the characters are cringe in this game, you do have, besides that, you do have some of the best characters in the series. So really, this game is underrated, and I would put it in S tier. Next up is Star Ocean 2, which I think is just a great game, despite being a little dated. And then we have Star Ocean, the Second Story R, which, in my opinion, is pretty much just a full-blown, solid upgrade of the original. And that will be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, Dark Warriors.